And welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I'm Robyn Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hi, Robyn. How are you?
Oh, peachy. I hope that my mic situation is not too bad. I left my mic home in because sometimes it's worse when they hear it. I left my webcam home in Chicago. I'm back in Rochester, so that's why I have this giant glass of wine.
All right. Well, let's jump right into it while my wife is still watching. And we're on strike
Yes.
on in all of the media. So the actors and the writers have gone on strike. The writers have been on strike. The actors have joined them, um, and that's certainly a challenge for the corporations who, writers like us. They always felt like, okay, we have to deal with them, but the actors, that's where you start getting into the money. And you've written a bit about this. What had caused the latest breakdown. It is sort of hilarious because the actors just want to continue to exist, and the studios are more like, no, no, no. We kind of just want we kind of like our little.
What if we could just like replace you and also not pay you for your work? Because that's what would really work better for us.
Um,
And this is very
yeah.
generous of us to offer you the ability to not be paid for your work.
Yes, they're reportedly at odds over several issues, including how much performers should receive in residuals from all the streaming platforms we use. And I've written about this in the past. This is a technology issue. Whenever technology advances, the studios don't want to share the benefits with the people who produce their product. It happened before with syndication, then DVDs or home rentals, and then now the various streaming platforms. Actors ask for higher compensation when the movie or series they're in does well with viewers, which seems fair. There are also disagreements over the use of artificial intelligence, which actually I want to. It's not necessarily
Yeah.
art. People start to think that you're talking about, I don't know, something from the Matrix or Terminator, and it's not artificial intelligence. It's not quite that term. I wish they would come up with something uh, more appropriate, like the sort of avocadator. Chipotle has a device that apparently can cut and core avocados for their mediocre guacamole, and he can do that in large numbers, which saves them a lot of money. But it's a
Wait, I'm sorry. Okay, wait, what? Fake avocados? I'm sorry. I like
No, no, no.
I
The device can cut and core a lot of the labor
Oh, okay.
producing
Sorry.
more quickly than to make guacamole. And that is not artificial intelligence. It's just a labor saving device. And most of the stuff that we're talking about in Hollywood, even some of the chat stuff that's always gone, it's essentially very fancy form of labor saving technology that is not necessarily artificial intelligence, even by the level of intelligence we would classify Lauren Boebert. It hasn't even reached that level. Um, but actors say they don't want to be replaced by computer generated images. They want control over where and how their likenesses are used. And I love that that's like an area of
Debate.
difference.
But you're like, "Mm,
Well, no, no, we want to
shouldn't
use
we own
your
your
image.
face, though?"
Well, they've been stealing, and studios love to steal from actors their images. So this has been every sort of rule you'd have to get. So often there was the rule of like actors had to be paid by the film as opposed by, I get you and I shoot a bunch of coverage of you and I put you into my film for ever. And then, obviously the limitations of the technology, it was usually over making two films out of one.
Mhm.
That even goes back to a big debate over the first two Superman films and Back to the Future Part Two that used sort of that actually used a straight out fake Crispin Glover. But here the technology is such that with voice, and once they get your image, they could drop you in and use you in certain films in perpetuity almost seamlessly. And so that's actually a problem. They can kind of just wipe people out. A lot of actors had been discussing lately about how their images have been used when they've been in background in TV shows and whatever. Um, and it's great for the studios to not have to pay these people, but it's hard for people who use that as sort of that's their work. That's how they kind of exist or get around. So,
Well, the thing is, yes, it is AI because one of the things that they want to do is, you know, pay a background actor for one day and then use their image forever for the rest of their life, and afterwards. Which I was thinking, like, has anyone knows that this could be awkward if one of those background actors makes it? Because that would also mean that if they made it and became a huge celebrity, the studios would also then be able to just use their image forever for whatever purpose they want, which is terrifying. But also, no one wants to get paid for one day's worth of work and then never get paid again. The other issue, and this is also an issue with with the writers, is streaming, and people are getting paid basically nothing for streaming, and it's a lot like what happened in the original 19, like the first big major uh, SAG strike back in the day when our least favorite one, our I guess now our third least favorite president, Ronald Reagan, was in charge, and people were like, "Hey, we acted in all these movies, and now people are making money off of playing them on TV. We would like some of that money, please and thank you." And the studios were like, "Not sure we actually want to pay you for that." Um, and Ronald Reagan worked out a really bad idea, or bad deal with the studios, where they would go for like 12 years without getting residuals and definitely not even ask for them before 1948, um, in order to like maybe get residuals in the future, which really pissed off a lot of the older actors in the movies that you and I like to watch,
mhm.
on the Turner Classic Movies, because they were like, "Hey, why don't we get anything?" Um, and so he worked out that deal. Then, when he was president again, the actors went on strike again because that deal had not been worked out yet with the studios. And they worked out something where they would get, like, residuals, but not before 1948. And all the money from anything going from 1948 to 1960 was going to go towards towards like general um, pension plans and healthcare and that sort of thing. And so you have that. Pension and healthcare are also an issue in this strike as well, because a lot of people are not hitting the mark that they need to make in order to get healthcare. They're not making enough to get healthcare. They're not making enough for their pensions. Um, because the vast majority of actors in Hollywood are not celebrities. They're not necessarily people who are making buttloads of money and are rich forever based on, whatever they did, especially now when we've got streaming. Um,
Yeah, as someone is sort of, well, tangentially in the TV and film industry more and theater, but I know actors know they generally don't make a lot of money. I mean, they're easy to be depicted as part of the elite. And it's sort of how conservatives will paint certain groups as elite, whereas like a plumber who might make a lot more money is considered salt of the earth or whatever. It's all a sort of a class debate. But these
and
folks,
and yet they also get mad when, like, people from Starbucks unionize or teachers unionize because, oh, they don't need to get paid that much. Why are they asking for more? With
well,
the
yeah, they just don't.
guys,
They don't like unions or
yeah,
workers. Where I was getting at though with the actor's point was that uh they actually don't make a lot of money compared, like I know folks in New York or in Los Angeles where these folks predominantly live to do their works, and especially if you are a lawyer, you are making more than 98% of actors in those areas and consistently. Like you're still,
yeah.
there's no chance that you are going to be it's feast or famine. And similar with the writers, there was an issue with the writer strike when they had part of the new technology. It's not like new revenue streams, new sources. It sort of changed. Fran Drescher, the actors union president, she had basically said that the whole business model has changed. So the writers used to work on a show 26 episodes or so. That
Mhm.
was about a year's worth of work. Now, um, there's no sort of normal type of TV season. They now do like 10 episode seasons.
8
It is,
episodes, yeah.
and it's very hard to make a living that way if you're a writer, because you have to like either back things up straight late. You're hopping on one show to hop on another, and it's not sort of organized that way. Similar to actors as well, to shop on a show that is actually, now it's sort of, here's our prestige drama, and it's going to run for like 40 episodes
Yeah.
and go away. 40 episodes over 20 years, like it's the BBC or something. So it's very hard to make a living this way. And especially if you are a, what we say, working actor. If you remember TV shows in the 60s or 70s, you'd always be like, oh, I recognize that person on I Dream of Jeannie or now on Bewitched or whatever. There was always, certain journeyman actors who were always constantly getting work and whatever. And it's becoming rarer now to sort of be able to make a living that way.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the argument, the defense the studios are given, or argument for streamers, is that they actually don't make a lot of money that way. And there's an argument that is sort of this big house of cards, that if they release the data for how little people are watching streamers comparatively, it's like not like network television. The advertising revenue drops, and there's no money to give these folks anyway. I don't necessarily say I believe that, but it is a case of the model has changed. There's so much television available that it is difficult to make actual money from this. The studios have lots of money, but they have never been able to figure out how to make sure that actors and writers and directors
It is
make
a
that way.
mystery.
Um,
Like how to like well, I mean, to be fair, they have to pay the CEOs hundreds of millions of dollars. And then what do they have left over for other people? Not much.
well, yeah, Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, and Sean Gunn, so the brother of James Gunn, the director, was criticizing, uh, Iger for making 400 times more than the lowest paid employee. And of course, someone on Twitter, a sort of blue check type, was sort of, well, his brother James Gunn makes 300 times, which he doesn't. I think he made like 4 million for directing a film. He doesn't make that much more
Yeah.
than workers. But James Gunn produces something, like he creates a work of art, and that work, like, the CEO of Disney or Marvel, he's the same CEO who produced films that flop, the films that
Yeah.
don't do well. So it's not like he's the quality bearer, or
Well, one of the things that they are discussing in the or asking for is to be paid based on how well their things do, because at this point people are getting paid the same for a runaway success as they're being paid for a flop, which
yes,
is,
I
not necessarily super fair.
no, I think there are folks starring in who had starred in Marvel films, for instance, and I think people are thinking they're getting Tom Cruise money, but they aren't. I think they're getting like a million. So some of the cast members in Guardians of the Galaxy, excluding um Chris Pratt, but even Chris Pratt, who's a major star by our standards, I suppose, by modern standards, he made like
And
seven
yet
million.
no one who is it that likes him? But I'm not like, no one likes him.
You're very all over today, Rob.
Sorry. No. And you know what? I will, while I tell you guys to like, share, and subscribe, because we're like 90 people away from being able to monetize this shit. Um, just so you guys know, I am in like a completely insane place right now. I'm back in Rochester getting my parents' house together to sell, and I have hives. So, thus,
Yeah.
giant glass of wine. It's technically
Yeah.
a spritzer, so don't worry, I'm not going to get wasted. But
So yeah, so my Chris Pratt point, beyond what either of us might think of him as a star, is that he made about 7 million for Guardians of the Galaxy, for what I read, which if you base the time he filmed that, is arguably less than the cast of Friends was making,
Yeah.
like 20 years ago. So it's not like they're not making runaway money on these in these films. And they're at the top of their field or whatever. I mean, no one should scream poverty for someone making 7 million. At the same time, again, I know people who make like there are attorneys in New York or California, who make significantly as much, if not more, and they do it regularly. They can continue doing it even if they, lose their looks, and
Mhm.
and they're not sharing it with managers, agents, and so forth.
Mhm.
So, but we like actors, we like folks who give us entertainment, um, so we should sort of pay for that entertainment. So we should pay for writing. We should pay for stuff. But that's been a long time problem. People don't want to pay, and that's beyond like the studios. I mean,
That's
even the
also the
people don't want
argument
to.
they use, like, like, oh, well, we can't have Napster, we can't have LimeWire because, those people who made that stuff deserve to get paid for their work. We can't, don't use torrents or whatever. Don't use that so that people get paid for their work. But if people aren't getting paid for their work, then screw you. Like, it's not basically they're saying, okay, the studio should get paid for other people's work.
Mhm.
And that is the moral argument that they are really trying to make here.
Well, they make tons of. I mean, they're making tons of money. The money is usually it's clear who's to whom it's going to. The challenge moving forward, I think that is actually structural, is with the technology. So we addressed some of the technology issues, having worked in corporate world where you do your job is to come up with cost saving measures. Yes, if you can come up with a way to, sure, like from a practical standpoint, if you can just put in CGI, and it's very cheap to put in CGI background people at a coffee shop, other than your, why wouldn't you? There's no, especially there's no artistic, you know, reason to have background people who are real people getting work. But at the same time, those people do need to get work to survive. and and I think that's something, you had said about, we can come up with these labor saving
Mhm.
devices, but the problem is that people need to still
Make a living.
make a living.
Well, because we don't live in a society where we say, "Hey, we've invented labor-saving devices and ideas and technology. How about everyone work less?" What if everyone worked less and people still made enough to live? No, we can't do that because in the United States, we attach a human being's moral value and worth to the amount that they work.
So yeah.
And that's how you say, basically, you work in order to say, I have proven my value as a human being. Can I please have healthcare and food and enough to live? Like, that is really the end all be all of it.
Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, a lot of people, and of course, the people who don't work and expect complete support from the system are often sort of the landed gentry. Yeah, we get that. I mean, it's the Star Trek future. You only get to the Star Trek future when you have decided that as a society, you are paying for everyone's. You are making sure that everyone has as much as a scarcity society, so everyone has access to healthcare, food, and shelter. But if you didn't, otherwise, these labor saving devices like the replicators or something, where they can just get your food and whatever free, would wipe
mhm.
out entire industries, and those people would then starve. Like, what happens to everyone who works in restaurants if you can just create perfectly good food in your own home and stuff like that or whatever. So, um yes, I mean, that's the legitimate debate we have here as to what I mean. The
Mhm.
other is, the actors getting screwed. So the bad deal that Reagan coordinated, the actors getting screwed, was why a lot of shows were able to run on your local TV, that we were able to watch them all the time. If actors were actually getting paid real money, if it was expensive to air reruns constantly of, I Dream of Jeannie, if that wasn't after a certain point, or old movies specifically, there was whole cable channels said their whole bottom line was basically that this is either all in the public domain or the actors are getting like nickels for every time we air it. That became the only way they could actually afford to put that out there. So the idea is like, where is the point where people will, it comes down to, I do agree, to people willing to pay for, I'm going to pay more for streaming because I want these actors to get um fairly compensated for all of these opportunities I have. Or like I've seen folks complain that people were pulling entire libraries of TV shows from streaming,
Mhm.
but it is expensive to have an entire library if you're going to be paying people. So of course studios are going to be like, well, yeah, I'm only going to pay for the shows that are such high value that I'm going to make a lot of money from advertising. Some that are mid range, even if they're good quality and I could keep them up, it's not worth paying the writers or actors for this based on this deal. And we would see more
I
of
mean,
that.
we have a lot more shows in general than we ever had before. And it's not like they're, required to run on a particular schedule. They, like that used to be like where it was like, okay, everything starts at around this time in the year, and then around, and then the season ends at this time in the year. Um, we are constantly expecting like new programming and new shows to come out, and that has sort of been like the nature of streaming in general. And we're not all, you know watching the same shows at the same time, except for, there are very few shows that people are watching live anymore, and most of those
Mhm.
are like reality shows, really, like where people are commenting about them in real time. um we don't, because there are so many shows and they're not, you know advertiser based. It is very difficult to figure out because, everything's based on streaming, and it's possibly more difficult to figure out what everyone is owed. But clearly they wouldn't be doing it if it weren't making them enough money. And if
Well, their argument is that it's so from corporate speak, it's a house of cards. So if I sell you on, hey, a lot of here's my buzzy um streaming show, advertise your product on it, and you're like, okay, and here's how much it costs. And if I'm kind of shady about the numbers, the true numbers, but I'm kind of bluffing you, then I'm gonna get a certain level. Once I reveal the numbers, it can go that it's like, why am I paying this much to advertise for thousands of people, like no longer millions? I mean, that had been an issue. This has been an issue for a while because TV's become so siloed, so that
Mhm.
the last episode and I got really screamed at from a bunch of folks, artists or so, when I was wondering, it's like, oh wow, this is interesting. The coverage that I saw for um Secession was like it was the
Mhm.
last episode of Cheers, but like 42 million people watched the last episode of Cheers. Like 4 million people at most watched the last episode of Session, but it was covered in the media as if it had the same impact culturally upon the world, which it just didn't.
Yeah.
And what is happening, and that is actually on a cable channel. And so with streaming, their fear is like, well, these shows get buzzed, they get written about a lot. And if you keep the numbers hidden, people will think of, well, based on all the coverage and whatever, it must have this huge impact. And I'm getting in front of these eyeballs, and this is going to then buy something. But it's not coming out that way. And the challenge is that once that's revealed, the house of cards fall in. It's like a scam. So then there's no money. It's like revealing your pyramid scheme. No one, once it's
Yeah.
revealed, no one makes money. Um,
But the thing is, people are making money. They're just not the people making, and, the art itself. It's the people who are, in charge of the studios, the people who are in charge of Netflix, the people who are in
yes.
charge at Disney, the people who are in charge at NBC.
Well, that's true. The problem is the actors are they want transparency. So actors and writers want transparency. Unfortunately, transparency is not necessarily going to make you more money. I think they should get it. I'm just saying, at this point, it could be explosive in the sense of revealing how few people are watching a lot of these series. And we will see. I think they are. I don't necessarily believe the reason the studios are being hedgy about it is because there's like all this money they don't want to share. It's more like all this money they're going to potentially lose once it's revealed. So that we will see more. No one can really know. But some of these streamers, my God, you're like, who's watching this? So we will find out.
I mean, to be fair, like most of the things that I stream are like British mystery shows from the BBC. Like that is
Yeah.
my
Well,
uh,
we're on, Wonkette just transitioned to Substack. Because when I asked the people subscribe and consider donating to us, we're not behind a paywall, but please pay. Writers have to eat, and
yeah.
so when you pay, like whenever you're
Pay for my
whenever you're
giant glasses of wine. No.
whenever you're consuming a product for free, and I'm this way. Some of
Mhm.
my favorite YouTubers, I subscribe, even if it's a small amount, I pay because if
Yeah.
if I'm not paying, who's paying? Either they're not getting paid for the content they're providing to me, or someone else is doing it for me. So I just sort of everyone should just try to do that. There's this American instinct, and maybe it's across the world, so human instinct to avoid this. I get so frustrated. I have known, again, law firm partners. A law firm partner who's making a lot of money was sharing a Netflix account with someone. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, pay for your damn, you're consuming, like you wouldn't shoplift, right? You wouldn't be like they arrested, law firm partner Bobby, whatever. They would be a weird thing. Like you just shoplifted gum. That's ridiculous. You make more enough to buy your own gum. Why wouldn't you share? The same with Disney passwords, stuff like that.
Except
They try to find reasons to avoid it. They don't want to pay for other people's work. They share that. They try to share um newspaper accounts and stuff like that. And
mhm.
I know, again, if you're consuming media, pay for it. Even if it's a small amount, pay for it.
I mean, the thing is that once people do get used to not paying for something or accustomed to that in some way, they don't necessarily, or if the possibility of it being free, they don't want to pay for it. Because also, like, to be fair, like, yes, your friend is a lawyer. Not everyone is a lawyer.
Yes, but the lawyer,
And,
my point is the lawyer should not be stealing a Netflix account.
yeah.
No, yeah, should not be sharing a Netflix profile or whatever. So that's my point. If it gets to the point where someone like that is feeling, but that's the idea. It's like either it gets devalued, or it's the idea, if I could steal it, I might as well. And I think it's
Yeah.
only in that area. Again, you wouldn't take a five-finger discount because you could. You'd be like, okay, well, this would be shady. But I think they do this in certain other forms of like, oh yeah, I share multiple newspaper accounts with people. I share multiple streaming accounts with people, and it'll all work out in a wash. But it doesn't. I think if we're seeing from the strike, it should reveal that writers are living on the margins at all levels. So not
Hmm.
fancy TV writers, and then people who write for theater like myself and other things. We aren't making tons of money, so you should like try to chip in and contribute. It has been something of like people saying, I don't want to pay for work. As you say, I think when people get used to things being free, they believe it should always be free. And I think one of the advantage, for that was a challenge with theater. People got into their heads
Hmm.
that the accessibility was about just like somehow giving it away. It's like, oh, if we make it cheaper, it's like, well, that's not the issue. You'll get people less likely to want to pay. Whereas, sports events became more expensive, but the value of it remained the same, so that people started still maintained
And
paying
this is
for it
the
or
thing, like
whatever.
people then accept, oh, okay, a sport, it costs like, okay, I don't actually know how much it costs to go to a sports game. Let's be real, people. But I think it costs like over $100, I assume, except for
Mhm.
for some reason I've heard the White Sox are less expensive, but people are like, oh, that is a thing that costs a lot of money. Um, at the same time, we have seen prices go up unfairly, like as far as like Ticketmaster goes, like we've seen concerts and like music things go up exponentially. And I think a lot of the issue is that we've seen so many things go like become so much more expensive that shouldn't necessarily be that expensive.
Mhm.
At the same time, when like some things are free, it's very confusing about like in terms
Oh,
of like
yes.
what we're supposed to be paying for. And a lot of the time, I do think that a, I'm not a, big capitalist exactly, but people got so used to television shows not having commercials.
Mm.
We don't like commercials anymore, but commercials used to be like what supported those shows. Um, People don't like websites with advertisements. Advertisements are what used to pay the writers. And so people, put on their ad blockers so they didn't have to see the ads and be
Yeah.
advertised to, which like I get it. They were annoying a lot of the time. They'd like cover the whole screen. But then we had to figure out alternate ways to pay like us, which in our case is donations. In other places it's paywalls. And we are going, I feel like we're very much turning into a gig economy in general, where it's like everything is like individually pay to play, which is an expensive way to do things, but also, it avoids the things that people don't want. With websites, it's advertisements, and they didn't, people got really upset over the idea that um, that websites would make more money per click. Like that was a very upsetting idea to people. And so that had to change. I thought it was, it was actually pretty good for writers. Um, it helped lead to a lot of, situations where writers were able to unionize and ask for more money, but consumers didn't like it. And like all that, saves you a click stuff and
Hmm.
everything started where it was like, okay, how do we get this for free?
Yeah. And people understood that advertising was the cost of one of the costs of getting this media, this entertainment. I mean,
Hmm.
folks understood that when with television and cable, or at least premium cable, you understood you were paying more to not have the ads, but also not have the ads, but more of not having interruption
Well,
during, say, a
yeah,
film or whatever.
but the thing
And then
is, you're
later,
originally not supposed to have commercials with cable, but then you did because it was like, oh, well, you're paying for this, so you're not going to get commercials. And then they were like, actually, you will have commercials.
well, that was premium cable. I think broadcast cable was essentially no different from standard TV. I mean, when I started watching it was sort of you were paying a bit more, but you were also it was there was something a reason for it. It was like usually like a slightly better type of quality entertainment or more options or whatever. Um yes, I mean essentially the bottom line is that you have to and people watch the Super Bowl for ads. So people have made a sense of ads as entertainment. So it's not like people don't like ads. I think that people just want to block the ads or there's a privacy issue or whatever. But bottom line, I think what comes to is that people have to they can't work people can't work for free,
Yeah.
and you've got to, if you are consuming anything, so this is my lecture, if you're consuming anything online, you should try to pay something for it or not consume it. And then
Hmm.
people say like, well, we if we don't do that, then it'll only be the um the evil right-wing sites, but they make a lot of money and they pay people. Like if it's a difference between like, you know, writing for good or writing for evil and making a lot of money, then after a while writers going to be, I mean, I'd be like, okay, if I have different options, but I'd be like, all right, black people suck, women aren't giving me enough sex,
You'd make so much
wine,
more money
wine,
as
wine.
Minnesotans.
Yeah,
Just,
exactly. Like I would just sell out and write for the Daily Wire. They would love me. I could get a job there today saying, yes, I'm going to talk about how awful black people are. Done. And, but so if you do want there to be work that is actually calling to account
also,
power or
those
whatever,
people
you should pay
are
for
really
it.
willing to pay as well. Like
Exactly.
people
They
donate an
are.
insane. People spend an absolutely insane amount of money just to give to Ben Shapiro personally. All these, right wing streamers and everything make obscene amounts of money, way more than we would ever get. Although, to be fair, we don't really watch that many, like that's been a right wing staple for a very long time in terms of like they listened to a lot of right, like they had their radio shows and everything. We tend to be more readers. Although I hope that you guys enjoy our streaming because we're fun and cute. But
I think liberals watch a lot of streaming. I mean, that's the future. If you're not doing
yeah,
that, you're going to be in trouble. But there's a lot of, I mean, again, there are a lot of streaming um, on YouTube and products on YouTube that do very well. That's left leaning. It's not all right wing. But I mean, some of it's in culture and other things. But we write culture stuff or do culture stuff. Um,
and then
eh,
people yell at us. 'Cause they're like, I don't even watch TV, Robin. Um,
yes, people find reasons to complain about everything that is an issue of the human race. Um,
one thing I did want to get to that I think, as far as strikes go, is the upcoming strong possibility of a UPS strike, which I think will, I mean, not only will it be the most expensive strike for America in general,
mhm,
in probably the last 100 years, it will probably be the most impactful. If UPS strikes, we're all fucked. Like,
mm,
and it's not like something like that. It's not just, oh, we're not going to be able to get our packages. I mean, stores are not going to be able to get their packages, all of that. And what they're doing right now is so important because the the drivers, themselves are showing, hey, this is the power that we have, which is the whole point of a strike. The whole point of a strike is, hey, we have this power, we can stop this, we can take it away from you, give us what we're, give us our fair share, which is also all the actors want. Like, they want their fair share. um and the reason that they're doing it is not for the, full-time drivers sake. It's for the part-time drivers who are making only $16 an hour, which is, oh my goodness, like, so little money for what they do. I mean, have you ever seen what UPS guys do? They're driving around in those trucks with no air conditioning, which I believe is also a thing that they are currently about to get. Fingers crossed for the UPS guys, and women. They are carrying these obscenely heavy, boxes everywhere. Um, which is a ton of work. Like, yes, that is worth the money that they are being paid. That is worth $42 an hour. Because, and it's worth $42 an hour because, this UPS is making $13 billion in operating profits alone. Last year they made 100 billion. I believe it was like 100 billion in profits in general. Um, yes, very good point. Definitely order extra cat food and cat litter if you also get that through the mail, which I also do. But it is, it will be really good. And this is the thing, I also think that all of these strikes, ultimately, yes, they're good for um, the actors, the writers, the UPS drivers. They're really extra good for everyone, because I think that what it is, sending a message about is that, hey, everyone does. It's not just, oh, we deserve our fair share. It's everyone deserves their fair share.
mm.
Everyone deserves, to be making a reasonable amount compared to the people who are just making money off of them.
uh, Given the impact of the because they've usually found a loophole of like, well, you have too much power if you withhold your labor, so we make it illegal for you. Right? Like in New York, it was illegal, technically illegal for subway workers to strike because that's
Hmm.
too much of an impact on people. Just weird, right? So I don't know, is there any risk, as we saw with the railway strike, of Congress or even the president, because as Biden had, does a break of saying you can't do this or this is too much of a risk
I
to people's
don't
lives.
think so. There hasn't been any talk of that so far. Hopefully, there won't be, because it really is very important that people get to see the show of power. Like the whole point of strikes is not just like, hey, it's not just for, the people in charge. It's not, oh, just the people in charge are going to suffer, because, it reminds the like regular everyday people how much they rely on these services. And it's the same thing with the actors. Like if people don't realize, because it is very easy, I think, to not realize um, how much value we get from services, because people
Mhm.
just sort of take it for granted.
Was it Megan McArdle? I was one of the who had talked about. I think you'd
Sorry, that
written
was
about
like
this.
the
Um,
it's like her
right.
name just does that to me.
Yeah. So, but she had something about the concept of working hard. I've always seen that. So, someone who, so the corporate exec who retires at 55, says, I worked really hard or something, and all of that is very. What's fascinating is you had said like, well, we kind of have the same job, and I know how hard you work, and it does. The idea is like it's not like we can respect that she is at a publication that pays her perhaps more than you would make, and
Yeah,
others, and but it's like an actor in a film that's not a major motion picture probably is not working dramatically harder. It's just that they're in an opportunity to earn more money. But that's
exactly.
not but it's
But
not
like
a we
I've
put a lot
worked
of morality, we put morality to working. Oh, so if you write for this publication, even if you are putting you're not actually putting more physical labor or physical
or
work or
mental
even thinking
labor.
hard. It
Yeah,
is just you happen to be fortunate enough to work at this publication, perhaps because your labor is deemed as more valuable. But again, that has nothing to do with, we really like from a puritanical standpoint to put a moral value behind it. So I worked really hard as opposed to I lucked out and got at a place with great corporate benefits. And now I cashed out at 55. I won the lottery. No one wants that feel because luck does not have the same feeling. We live in a world where
well, because we'd like
Americans
to
hate
see that
luck and
everyone
privilege.
earns everything, and then get to be, oh, they didn't earn it hard enough, so they, deserve nothing. Um, I will tell you, I've talked a lot about the fact that I worked in retail for a long time before actually getting a job as a writer, which weirdly separates me from a lot of people, because, not Stephen, not a lot of people who worked at this site, but a lot of people who have jobs as writers are people who, were able to just move to New York and immediately get like internships at fancy places because of their parents or because they had money. Um, you know, and so there was that whole uh issue. Like it's not that common, but I have worked both of those jobs, and yeah, I will tell you, I think retail is like harder and more exhausting. Partly because I worked at Wet Seal during the era of backless tops, which meant I would have to spend 2 hours undoing a rack, which sounds stupid, but it was
Mhm.
exhausting. And the idea
Yeah.
that, people who work minimum wage jobs or lower wage jobs are not working as hard as other people is absolutely ridiculous. You're working harder most of the time.
Yeah. And I mean, I've encountered whenever I've gotten, obviously some I've gotten bad service in retail and in restaurants or whatever, and bars, and often later I will encounter people who had those jobs like in those, as you say, the fancy publications or whatever, and working, and they would always joke, oh, I really sucked at that because he didn't really care, right? And they then were going to go off and then they were going to get their fancy jobs, their job that was their career. But they often brought a lot of those lousy habits to sort of the corporate realm, and if you would ever impose upon them to sort of, well, you need to show up to work on time, or you kind of need to kind of do this that someone's asked you to do, they would get really annoyed. But like, it is interesting, I found, as someone who's had all types of jobs, that like the threshold. So once you're like at sort of the good job, then it's sort of like, oh, well, they're certainly protected more often. And so then it's like, oh, well, you showed up late all the time. Then it's more like, oh, well, you're such a good writer or you're so good at these talents. Oh, we don't need to hold you accountable to
Yeah.
that. But if you were like at a restaurant and you're late for the lunch rush once, I don't, and it
Mhm.
doesn't, and there's no like, oh, you got hung over the night before and that's why you're late. No, it's like you have to commute or whatever, and the train is late. People get fired. There's like, so that, people, and
And you don't
I'm
get
just working hard.
severance and you don't get,
Yeah.
like, anything.
So like people in
Um,
retail and restaurant, they work, not only do they work very hard, they have such people have such clear, sometimes disregard for them. Like they are seen as, you're not okay, you didn't show up on time, you didn't do this on time, we're going to get rid of you, and no questions asked. And so they understand that there's no, they have to come in and do the best they can. And it necessarily shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be so ruthless. But
mhm.
it is how we kind
But
of
I mean, when you work retail, like I've worked both retail and as a server, and people very much get it into their minds, like they're basically high off of the concept of the customer is always right. Like they're like that power went to their heads, and they're like, "This is now my time. I am king or queen of all I survey, and everything I say is right." And they're not used to that in the rest of their lives. So they're like, "Oh, fantastic! I can exercise my power now."
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, one of my favorite moments from the TV shows Cheers. There's this obnoxious guy who sits at Carla's table and he takes out like $10 bills and he puts it. It's like, here's your tip. And every time you do something wrong, I take $1 away. And she
yeah.
just slowly starts flicking water in his face. Like, you take $1, $1. See, now you get nothing. And she's like, no, that was the best $10 I ever spent. And then she dumps the rest of it on him and walks off. But like that idea of like treating, there's a whole thing also about that of like, oh my god, people expect me to tip them for handing them food, for because
Yeah.
now like, oh, you just you just gave me the coffee instead of what, like tap danced or whatever, like go it. And also it's like it's not that much, it's like it's just an extra dollar, but like they feel so put out. And I think someone is like, well, I I work in my
Please
I'm a
tip more than
rental
a
person,
dollar.
wasn't the guy who was like he was like a landlord or something, and he was like, well, why don't I get tipped? So he put like a tipping thing or something. He wrote this in the New York Post. It's like, Jesus Christ, like, no, it's not, it is
Yeah,
not a
I mean,
service thing.
actually, the whole concept of tips to begin with was extremely racist because it evolved in industries that were like primarily black people at the time, and businesses were like, okay, so we don't actually want to pay people
Yes.
enough to pay these people enough to live, so we'll just like let the customers handle that.
No,
Um,
tipping in America is terrible. I mean, until they fix it, as Adam Conover said, until they
I,
fix it, you have to tip. But
but I will say, as someone who the problem is, as someone who was a server, I know that I made a lot more with tips than I would have with minimum wage, in the way that like when I was working at in retail, I made a lot more with commission. Um
yes, well,
I
that's capitalism and also labor, and also not all of it is equitable when people get
Yeah.
tipped. I mean, there's
Oh no, that's
the guys
absolutely true.
who,
If you are a good-looking man working in Nordstrom's shoe section, you can make upwards of 100,000 a year, no problem. Like if you sell, like you can sell $1 million worth of shoes, you make $100,000. And because you can, if you're a super nice looking man, and because the ladies like that, frankly. Um, I can make a lot because I'm really good at making people feel like they're super cool. But um, no, it's not equitable, but um, it does offer a it's problematic because like no, it's not equitable, but it also does like offer a way for people who don't necessarily have other opportunities to make a good amount of money.
mhm,
Like I also recognize that there are reasons why I got tipped more when I worked as a server,
mhm.
that other people might not have gotten. um
Well, if they share the tips, that's can sometimes sort of socialize the that
yeah.
aspect, but then everyone's a capitalist at heart, so no one really wants to socialize their tips. So they
Yeah.
kind of were like that. That is often where I guess you and I differ because I think people are terrible and are inherently deserve their capitalist society because at heart most people become capitalists. They're a socialist to like a certain point, and then it's like, wait a minute, I actually my socialism was a form of capitalism all along. I've never always been a capitalist. So and that's like bosses and corporations or whatever know, and everyone who's sort of union strong and of course the worst
Well,
are the worst are the small businesses, right? So every small
yeah.
business doesn't want to like, oh my goodness, like but if I paid you your healthcare, my little mom and pop coffee
We're
shop would
like
close.
family.
Yeah, we're like family, except I can't afford to like, pay you to get sick. It's like, okay, well,
Well, I
in that
mean,
case,
here's
I'll
the
go
thing.
work for someone
I
who's
think
not
that a
my
lot of time
family.
people assume that like socialism or communism means that everyone's supposed to be poor and just live that way. Whereas like I and most people who are anti-capitalist see it as no, everyone is basically okay. Like that is
Yeah.
the
Well, but that's not a human instinct, Robin. People want more than the person next to them. So I think that is bad. I think we should be better people. But the Vulcan in me says that humans are extremely limited. So they will always be driven by a desire to have more than someone next. You can never satisfy them. I mean, even that's why the Star Trek
it's
society falls
oh,
apart
no,
because
I
what they show is still a class. They still show a class society. So Picard has a certain larger place. It's like, well, why does he have a larger place? Oh, where he's the captain. So they're not really showing an equitable society. They show a world of classes society that people still accept in somehow, but you know,
here's the
I
thing, it
I still
doesn't
hope
mean
for the
that
best.
like I think that people have this idea that communism or socialism means that like, oh, well then if you're really talented, it doesn't matter. Like, no, that's not like what anyone is doing at all. It's just the basic idea that people do deserve just for existing basic necessities.
Yes, I think
Like,
that's I think obviously I
people should
support
survive.
that.
It's still fine if someone is like better at singing than someone else, like, or better at, captaining a ship. I don't know. I haven't watched Star Wars.
Well, yes, well they
Sorry, Star Trek, but
people like to put rewards to that. What does it mean to be better or to have certain things? So there's people who are terrible, like there was this person in San Francisco who opposed a form of the idea that you would sort of be giving free housing to people who needed housing by saying, well, who's going to pay for my condo? It's like, well, okay, well, you have a condo. Like, why? That's very different than like literally a 8 by 10 room with a toilet on the hallway, like some of the basic that we're just going
mhm.
to provide for people. You want a nice Russian Hill, San Francisco apartment, that's very different. But they still say, because someone should be paying for my standard. Like, okay, if this person gets this, why don't I get this? And I think that's the part that the struggle is that people suck. And it becomes very hard to get past that. That's the sort of the breakdown of all of those things. Um,
But what I will say is that, like, reflecting on some of my previous comments in this particular chat, is that, like, when you are in sort of like a more like desperate nerve, not, I don't want to say desperate, I wasn't, situation, you are like, anything that helps me come closer to being able to survive is like, thank you for that. And because you're so, you know, it is easy to say, like, okay, yeah, no, I'm okay with the fact that I get better tips than someone who, than another person for reasons. Um, sorry, I'm trying to be gracious. Or, I'm okay with the fact that I make more in commission because um, rich ladies think I'm cute and sassy. Like, it's easy to say, it's sort of, or I don't want a wage for tips because I do want to be able to make enough money to survive, and I know that I won't make that, and it won't be worth my time to wait tables if I'm not making a certain amount of money. And I think we do have the people on the bottom also competing, but it's more like competing to survive. And we end up very much drilling that into people, and in some way, like making them okay with certain amounts of unfairness.
Yeah, I am. I of course I still tip, but I actually tip. I'm inclined to almost want to tip more for things that limit human contact with me. So I'm so the Vulcan part of me. So I love the idea of going and to
Steven.
when I was in when we were in London recently, there was like place at the pubs they didn't have because staffing up has been a problem around the globe post COVID. So it's like you put your phone, you scan the menu, you scan what you order, it shows
Yeah,
up, you go pick it up, bring it back, you pay for it. And if you want more stuff, you scan your phone and order more stuff. So essentially it's removed the server. And I love that because it's one less person I have to interact with. And it's wonderful for people like myself, but I understand the impact is that there are lovely people who made a living doing that. But I'm sure most people are not like me and they love um there was one thing that was involving like a social event recently that my wife wasn't enjoying. And she looked and she was like, "Oh my God, I'm turning into you." And it was like that scene in Seinfeld where Elaine is wearing George's clothing. It was like my wife was wearing my clothing and turning into an antisocial person. So it's like, oh,
there
poor
can't be two
you.
of you.
There can't be, though, the universe can't handle that. I'd mentioned that to Rebecca, how I enjoy working on Sundays because it limits the actual interaction I have, even though you
With
and I,
everyone except
we're
for me.
yes,
And you were clear about, like, just so you guys know, he was clear about that. He was like, except for Robin, because we still talk every day.
we
Because
chat every
I'm
day. That's fine. Yes. But generally speaking, I love like I can just put my headphones on and write, and there's no chance of like the awful chat buzzers or someone contacting me or talking to me while I'm working. Is like literally I'm just not I wasn't designed
yeah, no, and that's
for
fair.
this
And I think,
society.
I mean, everyone has their thing.
Yes.
I will say, like, I tip big no matter what, because like I've worked in those industries, and I'm like, it like I someone mentioned earlier that they, sometimes feel inclined to tip more when someone is fucking up, because you're like, oh my God, I identify with that. I have been there, and I absolutely do that. I'm like, it's gonna be okay, because I will tell you, it sounds so dumb, but like, I know that when I was working in serving jobs, if like just one person gave me like a better tip than I was getting, I'd be like, okay, I'm okay now. I'm not panicking. And then I would be better at my job for the rest of the day, because I wouldn't be panicking. And that is why, it's a horrible situation to put people in, to make them work for literally no money, and, try, like, because really, like, you don't, like, you live off of tips. You otherwise get paid like 285 an hour. I could be dating myself, but like, you're in a panic, and if you start screwing up, you're screwed up for the entire day, and that just ruins everything. So I always try and like brighten someone's day a little bit.
Well, the tip
um
thing is always and which are like the idea because it puts people get power mad on that. They think that for the exchange of labor, they do that. We've seen that before. I think once online, um, it's on Twitter, or someone didn't like something you tweeted and was like, "Oh, well, I'm no longer going to subscribe to or pay anything to Wonkette," as I guess punishment to
yeah,
you. And it is that tip mentality because it's like, okay, well, it's not like, someone at the New York Times pissed you off, right? And this is sort of your active peak against a major corporation. Or it's like when you go to the airport and someone pisses you off, like I'm never flying that airline again. But it's like, okay, well, there's like four people who work like who work here, and
yeah,
you got pissed off by you, so you're going to punish everyone, all those people who you probably should know by name. Seems very petty, but that's that idea of like that's how I can exert power over you. I pay your salary mentality, as you say. The customer is always right mentality, which is not, I mean, you're a very
which
nice, polite person, but it's not like I can't be expected to
I have a
tap
temper.
dance. Yeah, it's like I can't be expected to tap dance for
Yeah,
my supper, especially on my off time, right? Like that's not
I mean,
cool.
if someone would pay me to tap dance for my supper, I would probably do that. But I am mediocre at tap dancing. So I don't know that I could get much for it. Although not a lot of people tap dance these days, so you never know. But I do that's also sort of what worries me about the thing we were discussing earlier where like, yes, pay for the media you consume, but we are now very much in a, you know, in certain ways, even with that, like a vote with your dollar mentality, which can be good, but can also be scary. Because, I mean, when you think about it, we technically work off of tips. And, you know, I'm not getting, we're not getting extra donations because I'm cute or because you're cute.
Yes, well, thank you. I tried living off my looks. It didn't work out. So, I think I was doing poorly in math at one point when I was a kid. And my mother was like, "You've got to get better." I was like, "No, I plan on living off my looks." It's like, "You need a better plan." Very good. Um, no. I think to me, it's the idea that I mean, it's one thing to vote for your dollar and like pettily. I've had people have the petty vendetta against a restaurant, but it's like, okay, they are choosing to never again eat at this chain, right?
Yeah.
And that's petty or whatever, but they are making a sacrifice. To me, it's weird when it's like, okay, well, I'm no longer paying, but I still expect to consume this content because we don't have a paywall. So that makes it even different. It's not like you are ripping up your subscription to People magazine and never are able to know who the sexiest man alive is. Making that sacrifice here, it's like, no, I still want to read People. I know it's not going to pay for it, that'll show you. Now
Yeah.
you're working for free, and that's kind of petty to me, so or bad.
Yeah.
Um,
It's,
we're past an hour now, and I was hoping to close this up at 45 minutes because now
I know, but it's been
we
a fun
want we
conversation.
wound up losing we wound up losing everyone. Oh, thank you, Michael.
Mhm. Do
It's
you see
it's
what I just um oh, yikes, sorry.
what was I ignoring?
The fact that I kept this on for like and in like 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. That's I did not see that. That's very kind of you. Thank you. A middle-aged man needs to hear that every so often. Um, so next week I will have just seen the movie Barbie, and my life will have changed.
Same. I have to take my
Okay, good.
sister on the grounds that I was really mean about her Barbies growing up, and I'm in Rochester, so I will do that. Um,
Um, uh,
like,
I'm sharing this
so
video in
mean.
this week's tabs, but Greta Gerwig the director, they'd interviewed her and she was talking about the films that had inspired the movie, and she's describing it. It's like pretty much my head. So it's like, oh my god, like this woman is like Singing in the Rain, Funny Face, like the specifically the Think Pink scene and Funny Face, one of my favorite movies. So I'm very excited to see this film, and everyone should go see it. And we'll be back on Sunday to do a specifically Margot Robbie, Barbie focus.
I actually did want to talk about I was gonna write up the Margot Robbie is mid thing, but I was
What? She's what?
okay. Can we go over a little bit for a second?
All right.
Um, uh, so basically on the YouTube, that was a reference to the fact that I look somewhat like Linda Ronstadt, just have her hair. But uh, on YouTube, on Twitter, there was a whole conversation this week with men going around declaring Robbie to be mid, meaning that she is mid tier attractive and not attractive enough to. They were like, in 1997, there were 7 girls working at every blockbuster who worked at every blockbuster that looked like Margot Robbie, and I'm like, so yeah, that was like just an insane bout of misogyny on the
No,
internet.
no. I don't think a woman's worth should be based on her physical appearance, but also she's an objectively stunning creature, and also not, and I think it's not even just how she look. I mean, I just maybe that's the issue, because all I think of is that particular ass whooping scene in the Harley Quinn movie where she gets hopped up on coke and beats everyone, all these guys up, and maybe that's what's hurting their feelings because she beat up
I
a lot of
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, I
Uh,
think she's super cute. I also really loved the Tanya Harding movie, even though it wasn't as sympathetic as Tanya Harding as I would have been.
wait, she played. Was she in that?
Yeah.
I'd never. I would should check that out then. Was she Tanya Harding or?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's pretty good acting. I would have seen her as a Nancy Kerrigan. Who was Nancy
No,
Kerrigan?
she was a good Tanya Harding, and it was almost as sympathetic towards Tanya Harding as I would have been, but not quite.
All right. Um,
And yeah, that's another discussion for another day.
all right. Well, thank you, Robyn. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank
Please
you so
like,
much. Everyone,
share,
like, share,
subscribe.
and subscribe, and yell at your friends to do so also so that we can make some money.
Yes, get us to the yes. Please subscribe, and we'll be back next week for our Barbie themed Dream House edition. Bye bye.
Okay.